All right, so today we're going to talk about something fascinating, the ancient world's version of going viral. We're going to explore how goods, people, and most importantly, powerful ideas spread across entire continents long before the internet was even a dream. I mean, really, stop and think about that for a second. How in the world did a tiny little peppercorn from India make a 5,000-mile journey to become one of the most valuable things you could own in the Roman Empire? The answer shows us a world that was way more connected than we usually give it credit for.
And believe me, it wasn't just pepper. South India was like a treasure chest overflowing with gold, spices, and all kinds of precious stones. And the proof? Well, it's pretty solid. Archaeologists have literally dug up troves of Roman gold coins there. This wasn't just a little bit of trade. This was a massive flow of commerce that completely reshaped economies on both ends. Okay, so the big question is, how did all this stuff get from point A to point B? Well, it moved through this incredible network of routes. Think of them as the world's very first highways, linking up faraway cultures and creating unbelievable wealth.
You know, this ancient poem, it just paints such an incredible picture, doesn't it? It's not just some boring list of goods. You can practically feel the energy, the hustle and bustle of a port city like Puhar. It was a true global hub, with stuff pouring in from everywhere, from the mountains, from the rivers, and all the way across the seas. But of all the things being traded, man, nothing screamed luxury quite like silk. That rich, glossy feel made it the ultimate status symbol for the Roman elite 2,000 years ago. It was basically the Gucci of the ancient world. So why the crazy price tag? Well, it all came down to how it was made. It was a super complicated, multi-step process. And for thousands of years, the method was a closely guarded secret, first invented by China. So by the time that fabric finally reached Rome, you better believe it was worth a fortune. And you know what happens when there's that much money on the move, right? Power. Power always follows the money. And controlling these trade routes, that became the very foundation for building entire kingdoms. If you look at this timeline, a really clear pattern starts to emerge. You see these powerful dynasties, like the Cholas in the south or the Kushanas up in the north. They didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They strategically placed themselves right on top of the main arteries of commerce, the fertile river valleys, the coastlines, and of course, the major overland route. The deal was actually pretty simple. Traders would pay taxes and offer gifts for safe passage. And in return, the kings used that money to build up their armies and protect the very routes that were making them rich in the first place. It was this perfect loop of wealth and power feeding itself. And the Kushanas, oh, they were the absolute masters of this game. By taking control of a huge stretch of the Silk Route, they didn't just get rich, they completely changed how commerce worked. Their genius move was being among the very first to issue their own gold coins. This created a stable, trustworthy currency that just supercharged trade all along the route. But here's where it gets even more interesting. These routes weren't just for cargo and coins. They were also pathways for people. And some of the most determined travelers of all were pilgrims who were making these insane journeys for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with making a profit. The definition itself sounds simple enough, right? But the journeys? Wow. They were anything but simple. You had these Chinese Buddhist pilgrims, like Fa Xian and Xuanzang, who would often travel with merchant caravans on these epic, sometimes years-long quests, just to visit the places where Buddhism began in India. I mean, can you even begin to imagine the sheer terror? Fashian writes about getting caught in a storm for 13 straight days. The merchants on his ship started throwing their valuable cargo overboard just to keep the ship from sinking. But he held on for dear life to his precious books and statues, the whole reason for his journey. What an incredible testament to his faith. And get this, even after all that, after surviving this nightmare storm, his journey was far from over. It still took him more than 90 days just to get to the island of Java. The scale of these voyages, it's just mind-boggling. Then you've got Xuanzang's story, which is just as mind-blowing. When he finally went home, he wasn't carrying silk or spices. He was carrying knowledge. Over 600 priceless manuscripts loaded onto 20 horses. This is a huge clue that the kind of cargo moving on these routes was starting to change. And that right there,
that brings us to what might be the most important takeaway of this whole story. Because the most viral, world-changing thing to travel along these ancient networks wasn't a product at all. It was an idea. In fact, whole sets of ideas, new ways of thinking about life, about faith, about everything. So what happened was a new strain of Buddhism called Mahayana started to develop, and it just spread like wildfire along these very same routes. So what was so different? Well, for one, instead of just using signs and symbols, artists started making actual statues of the Buddha. And the whole goal kind of shifted. Instead of just focusing on your own personal enlightenment, this new idea of the bodhisattva emerged, an enlightened being who chooses to stay in the world to help everyone else. It was a much more relatable, community-focused version of the faith. And the result? It was absolutely extraordinary. The trade routes became belief routes. This new form of Buddhism traveled east, all the way to Japan, and southeast down to Indonesia, and in the process, it completely and permanently redrew the spiritual map of Asia. Meanwhile, back in India, another really powerful idea was bubbling up. It was called bhakti. And this was a pretty revolutionary concept. It was all about a direct, intensely personal devotion to a god, and it just sliced right through social barriers. The idea was that anyone, didn't matter if you were rich or poor, high caste or low caste, could have a direct line to the divine. Listen to this quote from the Bhakti poet Uppar. It's just stunning. He's saying a person's devotion, their inner faith, is what really matters, not their social status or what other people think of them. He says he worships these people, that they are gods to him. I mean, what a radical idea for challenging the whole social order of the time. And it wasn't a one-way street either. It wasn't just Eastern philosophies on the move. These very same networks brought some of the first Christian preachers all the way from West Asia to the coast of India. They actually established some of the oldest Christian communities in the entire world. The exchange of ideas was truly global. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. What's the big picture here? What we're seeing is an ancient world that was deeply interconnected in ways that really did lay the groundwork for the world we live in right now. So when you really get down to it, this whole story that started with a simple peppercorn, it becomes about something so much bigger. It's about how trade creates power. It's about the incredible journeys people will take for their faith. And at the end of the day, it's about how ideas are the most powerful, most contagious cargo of all. And that, of course, leaves us with one last big question to chew on. Our modern Silk Roads, our fiber optic cables and satellites, they're moving information at the speed of light. So what ideas, what beliefs, what cultural forces are going viral right now that will end up shaping the world 2,000 years from today?